After years of waiting, the Superlight 2 is finally here. Thing is, it looks nearly identical to the original. Now, look, there have definitely been some improvements under the hood, but has Logitech done enough for anyone to actually go out and buy one?
These are the same mushy side buttons that the GPX launched with, which is kind of sad.
I just don't think that there is enough blaze trailing going on here to really justify this as a 2.
But when it comes to these stock skates, they're still absolute dog shit.
Sounds kinda grim, but let's find out together. Is the Superlight 2 the upgrade we've all been waiting for, or just a waste of money? Alright, so we've already made videos about the original G Pro, and more recently, we talked about Logitech's decision to not implement 4K polling rates into their new mouse. But today, we are bringing you a proper review of the Superlight 2. Once again, Logitech claims that they worked with over 100 pros to ensure that their new mouse is worthy of being used on esports' biggest stages. But a lot of you have been asking what they actually changed with the new model, because from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like much. The shape is the same as the original G Pro and the first Superlight, which makes sense because it's always been known as one of the safest shapes among all gaming mice. Logitech designed their mice hoping that 99% of people could just pick one up and have a good time. And for that very reason, I don't think a ton of people expected the Superlight 2 to look or feel very different from its predecessor. But inside the mouse, there have definitely been a few changes. Logitech reduced the weight, just a measly 3 grams, mind you, and added new hybrid optical mechanical switches. When you set them to hybrid mode, they only make use of the optical feature when you click down on mouse 1 and 2, which conserves battery life when it's not in use. And since the new switches are optical, hopefully you won't have any double clicking issues. As for the sensor, Logitech has upgraded to the Hero 2, which allows you to set your DPI to more precise increments and change the X and Y axes. Now, they say that this could be useful for refining the sensitivity of vertical spray control in games like CS, but I don't really think it's something I would ever use. But one of the more controversial changes is to the bottom mouse skate. Logitech has gone with a new design that points slightly outwards from the mouse rather than inwards like the original Superlight. In theory, these new zero additive PTFE skates should offer a smooth, clean glide. But so far, not everyone agrees.
The mouse feet are not up to par with other top tier brands.
But when it comes to these stock skates, they're still absolute dog shit and you need to replace these.
Another controversial change is Logitech's decision to upgrade to 2K polling rates rather than 4K. Many of their competitors have already made the jump to 4K and even 8K, so it does feel a bit weird. We talked about the community's reaction to that decision in our video about polling rates last month, if you want to check that out later. Truthfully, the arguably best update to the Superlight 2 is that it now uses USB Type-C. They certainly took their sweet time, but hey, better late than never, I guess. So that's basically everything new about the Superlight 2, but does it actually feel better? Well, luckily, Logitech were kind enough to send Niall their new mouse so that he could test it out. And here's what he thought.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
All right, so first off, I just want to say thank you to Logitech for sending me the mouse to review. This video is not sponsored by them, so as always, I'm just here to give you my honest feedback on the mouse. I've mostly been using it on Valorant and old school RuneScape for the past few weeks, and here's what happened. When I opened up the box, it was almost impossible to tell the difference between the original Superlight and the new one. Of course, my OG Superlight is magenta, but in a purely visual sense, the only changes are the USB-C port and the direction of the Pro Superlight text. It's no longer sideways when you turn the mouse over. The bottom skate also points slightly outwards rather than inwards now. Once I started moving the mouse around on my soft Artisan Zero, my initial impression was that the skates are pretty bad. I don't expect stock skates to be amazing on any mouse, but the Superlight 2s felt really muddy and just too slow for me. And since they changed the skate design, I can't just put my extra set of core pads on the mouse either, which is pretty annoying. I don't know why they decided to change the shape of the skates, but moving on. As for the new switches, a lot of people have been complaining that they feel way heavier than the original Superlight, but there seems to be a lot of variance with each copy of this mouse. Mine really didn't feel that much heavier, and I actually like the slightly more tactile feel. Here's a quick sound comparison. Logitech says that the scroll wheel is unchanged, but I actually think it feels better. My original Superlight felt and sounded kind of scratchy, but the new one is smooth and I can still feel each stop nicely. As for the side buttons, there's still barely any post travel and the clicks feel more tactile than the original Superlight, but even so, they're still not that great. To set up the new mouse, I downloaded Logitech G Hub, even though I prefer using onboard memory manager. Then I set the switches to optical only, set my polling rate to 2K, and adjusted my DPI before testing out Logitech's new sensor calibration feature. Since I'd been using Pulsar's 4K X2H for about 3 weeks before testing the Superlight 2, I calibrated it using both mice, and G Hub actually told me that there was a 17 DPI deviation, so it applied their correction to account for that. DPI deviation kinda scares me because two mice both set to the same DPI can actually feel different, and that would drive me nuts. The goal of this calibration is to help your old mouse feel as similar as possible to your new one. That being said, the X2H is roughly 6 grams lighter, so unless you do this with another 60-gram mouse, then it probably won't feel the same, no matter what you do. As Dimitri mentioned earlier, you can actually set a separate DPI for the X and Y axes, but I didn't bother doing this because I was kind of scared that it would mess with my muscle memory. Once everything was set up to my liking, I turned on onboard memory mode and imported my profile just to avoid having to use G Hub in the future. Then I hopped into a game of Valorant to see how the Superlight 2 performs. I've used the original G Pro and Superlight quite a bit over the past few years, so I didn't have to get used to the shape or anything like that. I felt pretty comfortable with the mouse from the get-go, but really didn't enjoy the muddy skates. So after a few days, I replaced them with some Superglide V2 dots and also tried the included grips on mouse 1 and 2. I'll probably pick up some core pads or something with a bit more control once they become available, and the included grips were okay, but I still prefer the slightly grippier feel of Pulsar's Super Grip Tape. While testing the mouse, I was really trying to see if I could tell the difference between Logitech's 2K versus the 4K that I've used on Pulsar's X2H and Razer's DeathAdder V3 Pro, and honestly, I really couldn't. To be fair, the Superlight always had very low motion and click latency despite the outdated hardware, so I'm not surprised that the new mouse feels good even on 2K polling rate. The sensor was always great. I no longer have a Zowie with Diac Plus, so maybe I would have noticed a difference if I was still using a faster monitor, but it still felt really good on my 240Hz Acer. And I know a lot of people are upset that they only managed to get the mouse down to 60 grams, but personally I'm okay with anything in the low 60s. And there are some basic mods that you can do to the mouse if you really want to, just know that it might void your warranty. Plus Logitech says that 60 grams is the preferred weight for a lot of the pros that they collaborated with when making the mouse. But where the Superlight 2 really shines is its battery life. I often found myself charging the X2H and DeathAdder every 2 or 3 days, but I can honestly go a full week without charging the Superlight 2, which is really nice. Between work and gaming, my mouse is on a lot, so I was really impressed with the Superlight 2's efficiency. Overall, I think it's a great mouse. It's definitely not the upgrade we were all hoping for, but aside from the skates, I do enjoy most of the changes. That being said, we can't just ignore the fact that at $160 US, it has a very steep price tag. And I honestly just can't justify spending that much money on this mouse. If you already own a Superlight, then I don't think you need to go out and get the upgrade. Until there's some sort of price drop, which is unlikely to happen soon since the mouse just came out, I'll probably just stick with my 4K DeathAdder and X2H for now.
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
And there you have it. The Superlight 2 is easily the most hyped mouse release of the year, but so far, it has been met with mixed reviews. And we kind of agree. Are the upgrades enough for you to pick one up though? Well, that's for you to decide. The thing is, there's a lot more competition now than there was a couple of years ago. In some ways, the Superlight 2 is still outclassed by a lot of other mice, and those mice cost a fraction of the price. Logitech has dominated the peripheral space with both the G Pro and Superlight for a good long while, but with their newest release, it seems like now they're the ones with some catching up to do. This is the Pulsar X2H.
You find it's big enough for your hand?
So this is the crazy thing, Colten. Something about the way that they've done the hump in the back and the width, there's like some witchcraft involved, but it just fits.